Joe and I started homeschooling, we were sort of the Lone Rangers. And so our goal in homeschooling after finishing 21 years has really been to come alongside and help you and help homeschooling moms in a way that we just didn't have. So back in the late 1990s, I guess it was, we helped establish a fine arts seminar co-op in Columbia. And so the goal of this co-op was to teach the fine arts from a Christian historic perspective. So as the co-op got going, we added a few electives, and one of those was public speaking and the other was worldview, both of which I taught. So one of my favorite classes was this class of 10 to 15-year-old boys. Both of my sons had just gone to college, and I really missed having the boys around. So this was the most fun class. They were gregarious. They were totally uninhibited because there were no girls in the class. So we had a great time. So one of the things I wanted to teach the boys was stories are infinitely more interesting than facts and statistics. And if you'll couch your facts and statistics in a story, maybe your audience will remember one of the things you were trying to impart when they leave. So one day, to get this point across, I brought in 25 big National Geographic maps, you know, the big kind. So I gave the maps to the boys and asked them to look at the maps and get up and give me a 3-minute impromptu speech on something interesting they found in a map. So for the first time in the history of this class, there was silence. And one of the boys was brave enough to say, "Miss Tyler, there is nothing exciting or interesting in a map." I said, "Okay, now turn the map over." And all of the maps, how National Geographic does, has stories of the people groups about the people who populate that particular geographic region. I said, "So now read the back of your map and get up and tell me something interesting." So the point was the story. So the boys get up and we run over our hour, and I, who have no spatial relationship abilities at all, had these 25 maps to fold up. So I'm struggling with one of these big maps, and it's this thick after 5 minutes of trying to fold it. Shane, who was 13, looked at me and says, "Miss Tyler, I can fold those maps." I said, "Okay, Shane, have at it, honey." So in the time it took me to fold one, he folded 24 maps. So I looked at Shane and I said, "Shane, honey, how did you do that?" He didn't even roll his eyes. He says, "Miss Tyler, you got to fold them the way they're bent." And it reminded me of what I had just read Chuck Swindoll say about Proverbs 22:6, and I'm going to refer to my notes here for just a minute. "Teach a youth about the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now here's what Swindoll says. We might paraphrase the verse to read, "Adapt the training of your children so that it is in keeping with their individual gifts or bents, the God-given characteristics built into them at birth. When maturity comes, they will not leave the training they have received." So one of the things I think we can do for our kids as moms that expresses our love for them and our belief in them and the great potential they have is to become students of them, to figure out the way God has wired them and what makes each child unique. So in my book, in this chapter on helping your child discover his purpose in life, I look at 4 or 5 things. One is unconditional love, and we don't have time to talk about that this afternoon, but always extending that grace and that affirmation to our children rather than being nitpicky and negative. And there's a difference in correction that's biblical and then becoming nitpicky, negative moms. The second that we'll talk about a little bit is personality types and then spiritual gifts and learning styles. And we have very limited time today, but we're going to cover those briefly so that we can begin to understand how important it is to understand our children's bents and what makes that such a powerful educational tool. Because if we have a standalone scope and sequence chart and we don't bring all we know of that child to that scope and sequence chart, we are missing the beauty and the power of homeschooling.